Hello, TBR Nation. This is Amber Kuhn from the Perfect RIA. Thank you for joining me on today's Follow-Up Friday. Before I get into today's recap, if you're enjoying our episodes, we'd love for you to give us 5 stars wherever you listen to our podcast and make sure that you're subscribing so you don't miss an episode. On Monday, we switched things up a bit as Matt was joined by Stephen Jarvis from Retirement Tax Services. Now, if you aren't familiar with Stephen and the work that he's doing at RTS, Stephen left the world of corporate accounting a few years ago to work with financial advisors because he said there was this huge deficit of tax planning for advisors and an understanding of how to use different tips and tools with clients. Matt and Stephen were talking about a tax strategy that everyone knows, but almost no one implements correctly. Stephen shared that anytime they bring on a new client, the first thing they do is ask for the last 3 years of tax returns. And they have a checklist that they go through, and one of the things they're looking for is the 8606. He said that the biggest source of amendments for new clients is identifying where someone tried to help them do a backdoor Roth contribution, and it didn't get reported correctly. And in this instance, it's the opposite of helpful because a lot of the time you end up getting your client double taxed. Stephen at RTS recently released a masterclass on how to do a backdoor Roth, which is a step-by-step walkthrough as well as how to articulate it to the client, the tax preparer, how does it get reported, and how do you check it on the tax return. He said that the best tax planning is the simple, consistent things that are done over time. Matt shared how he mentions this to clients in every single client meeting as they transition into Roths. And he'll say one day they're going to get a lump sum of money and that they'll be grateful if they have a pool of money on which taxes have already been paid and that they can pull the money out without getting killed in taxes. Stephen said everyone should consider Roth every year, and he does this for himself too, which is a part of why he feels great recommending it to clients. He looks for every opportunity to get money into a Roth and take the IRS out of the picture. Matt and Stephen then went into some common mistakes that get made with this. One of those is a reminder that the 8606 looks at account values on December 31st, not the account value when the client did the conversion. Stephen said that the backdoor Roth contribution is a multi-step process. From a non-deductible contribution to an IRA, then a distribution from the IRA, and then a contribution to a Roth. And what he sees happens a lot is that tax preparers type 6,500 is taxable, and then they move on. He said this is where you as the advisor need to be proactive because in that instance, that first 6,500 was already taxed. And then this ends up requiring that amendment that Stephen mentioned earlier on. Another issue they see tends to come up when clients change tax preparers because the 8606s aren't consistently filed. And this is why you want those tax returns year after year. And you, as the advisor, want to be tracking this for clients so you know where things are. So as you heard Monday, there's a lot of mistakes that can happen, but Matt and Stephen said you need to look at the goals that you're trying to accomplish and the value that you can provide. But you need to take the time up front to have a system, process, and a checklist to make sure that you're doing things correctly. Sometimes with the tools that they shared, they said advisors lean into a software to get recommendations, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily understand how it works or how to articulate it to clients. And while they said some of them have created a great product, Stephen said they aren't to the point where you can just trust them on their own. Every tool needs a good operator. So you can use it to guide your process, but then that isn't the finish line because there are a lot of things that are missing. This is also why Matt shared that he tells his clients that he insists on doing his best work, and he can only do that if he manages all the accounts. And this led into the discussion on why it's important to focus on that communication with clients, articulating things well, and how you can set the expectations for things that you're going to be helping them with or things that you're going to be doing, especially if it's something like the backdoor Roth that can be a little challenging. And by explaining things the same way again and again, you don't have to spend that brain power and energy on that or trying to come up with how you're going to explain things. You can just do that without thinking. Let's get into action items. Roth accounts need to be looked at for every client every year and use the dishwasher rule. Let your clients know that you're looking at it and considering it every year. And you have to get tax returns from clients every single year. Be sure to check out Retirement Tax Services for their podcast, coaching program, and their desktop tax guide. If you're interested in being a part of the second annual RTS Tax Summit, reach out to lifestyle@theperfectria.com for more information. Lastly, you can get signed up for the RTS Masterclass, and you can do that by visiting the links in the show notes. On Wednesday, Matt was joined by Louis Schiff from Birthing of Giants to talk about leaving the middle class, getting to the next level, and a secret to success. Lewis shared how he was a natural entrepreneur and he became fascinated with the question of why is it that he was doing better than his friends? And that question grew into why do some people who grew up as middle class do better than others? When he looked at this, the numbers showed that roughly 1 out of 10 in the middle class manages to accumulate some type of wealth that puts them in that top 10%. So really the question was, how is it that we all start out life with the same resources, but some of us get different results? His research led to the book, The Middle Class Millionaire. And then he's focused on how do those people operate because they do something a little different than everyone else. This led to him wanting to coach the self-made wealthy. The reason being that he said these middle-class millionaires are the job creators and the spreaders of global economic impact. So he became obsessed with the idea that if he could take really successful people and make them into even more successful people, they would be taking on poverty at a global level. Lewis said the self-made wealthy work more hours than others, but more than that, they approach failure and risk differently. He talked about the so-called hero gene and that it exists in a lot of entrepreneurs. And with failure, this is where all the great learning comes from. And those who are successful are actually sharing their failures and letting go of that embarrassment and self-preservation. He said entrepreneurship is a great word, but underneath that is innovation. So if people are so scared to talk about or share their failures, that's going to lead to a loss of entrepreneurship and in turn, innovation. Lewis also talked about nodal networking, which is about how very successful people typically have about 5 people they're close to in the business context. And those are people who can help you get ahead and you're constructing a small network. And you want to draw connections with them. And it really starts with giving before you ask, but it also requires you being open. He said that one of the huge secrets to success is to do as much as possible of what you're really good at and as little as possible at what you're really bad at. Lewis said with creating wealth that it really comes down to that, how much you want it, and are you willing to find out what you're bad at so that you can do more of what you're good at. And he wrapped up by talking about the things that are truly worth doing in life. Connecting with a handful of people to go on a journey with, learning about yourself and your capability and strengths, and then having an impact on people that you may never have met. Wednesday's action item was to visit birthingagiants.com to learn more about Lewis and his program, as well as one he does at Oxford every August called Moonshots and Moneymakers. On Thursday, Jamie was talking about confirmation bias and how it can help you be a better financial professional. To show how this works, Jamie first talked about astrological signs by sharing so-called characteristics of 2 signs, Aries and Leo, of which she said she identified with both because of all those generalized statements provided and because you can begin to pick up on all the things that you want to believe about yourself. That's because of confirmation bias. We want to believe what we want to believe about ourselves. She went into some learning she's done on this about why we believe and what we don't believe and how we're skeptical about certain things, and then something happens and we just end up believing it. Jamie went into System 1 and System 2 thinking, where System 1 is near instantaneous thinking, and it's that gut reaction, the subconscious thoughts. System 2 is the slower thinking, and it requires more effort, and it's intentional, and it might even require overcoming System 1 thinking. So what does this type of thinking have to do with zodiac signs? When Jamie read these and instantly identified with them, it was her System 1 thinking that was the confirmation bias. Now, if you ask someone to look at a zodiac sign and find which one correlates with you, it'll likely be different than what you would choose because that person is using System 2 thinking because they're passing things through a filter. Jamie then went into marketing and buying decisions and surprisingly shared that people make most of their buying decisions based on System 1 because the brain is lazy and wants confirmation bias. So you're quick to go to brand names and things that you trust. So how do you use this type of thinking to relate to your clients? Jamie said people tend to lean towards what is most familiar to them. So she said that you need to be cognizant of that System 1 thinking and making decisions based on their intuition. And then you also need to apply another principle, which is that people either move towards pleasure or away from pain. So when she's working on marketing, she said that she'll draw this out where she writes down System 1, intuitive, brand recognition, conscientious, instinctive, emotional reference. And then she draws a circle with one side saying pain and the other side pleasure. And whatever she's offering, she's either moving away or towards it, and she uses those filters. Jamie said most advisors try to overcomplicate things instead of dialing it down to the basics. And that's true in your marketing and your offerings. And then you also need to focus on your customer experience. Jamie's action item was to remember that everything your office publishes is marketing content. And everything you give a client as a deliverable is an opportunity for a marketing event. But you need to have different policies in place to think about how you're going to use the research that she shared to promote your brand so that you can change lives. Before we go, TPR Nation, if you're ready to grow and dramatically impact your life and those around you, and you want resources to help, reach out to us at lifestyle@perfectria.com, or you can visit theperfectria.com/go. That wraps up this week's recap. Thank you for joining me, and please share this or any of our episodes with another advisor or team member who you think might benefit from listening. And until next time, happy planning.